I am Lawrence Chuno, and this is Doing Jazz. Hello everyone and welcome to Doing Jazz. My name is Lawrence Chuno and this episode is with pianist and composer Elio Villafranca. In addition to being a well-reviewed pianist and composer, Elio is also an accomplished educator who teaches at NYU and Juilliard. His latest project is a double disc release titled CINQUE. CINQUE is a product of an earnest and careful execution of creativity. This album seamlessly educates and entertains, and in the same breath invites the listener to introspect. The music playing in the background is the title track. During my conversation with Elio, you'll hear the songs The Capture and Maluagda. These songs are all from disc 1 of CINQUE. After listening to this episode, you can learn more about Elio Villafranca by going to the website of the show, www.doingjazz.net. And you can listen to more episodes of Doing Jazz by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, or any of the available podcast vendors. While on iTunes, please rate the show, leave a comment, and share the show with your loved ones. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I present Elio Villafranca in your face. Elio Villafranca, welcome to Doing Jazz.
Thank you so much, Lawrence.
Thank you for coming. So, when we were talking on email, you told me you'd be leaving the city very soon for going on a tour, I think.
Yeah, well, I have some jazz camps to go to in San Francisco, and then some concerts in San Francisco. Then I will be headlining the festival. I think it's called the Northwestern Jazz Festival in Buffalo, New York.
Oh, nice.
With my jazz incubators, the band that I did Caribbean Tinge recording live at This Is. Then I'm gonna go on a tour, on a world tour, if you will, releasing CINQUE. The first stop will be Australia, Sydney and Melbourne. We're gonna be presenting CINQUE over there, and then the second stop will be Mexico, Guadalajara, where I'm gonna be bringing all of my musicians there also for a CD release concert of CINQUE.
Nice. So CINQUE is this new CD that you have. It's not just a CD, it's 2 discs, 2 CDs. And it's not just music, it's a project. It's like a huge project. And I was talking to you and you had told me how long it has been in the works, how long it's taking you to bring it to fruition. I usually listen to, whenever I have somebody here, before the person comes, and I usually listen to their work and to the CD they want to talk about. And I kind of start getting used to a few of the songs, maybe 3 of the songs, and I understand the songs and I can now maybe talk about those songs. But in this case, I couldn't pick one song because it's like when I was listening to the CD, I'm still on the first CD. I've finished listening to it. I've listened to it 3 times.
I'm sorry about that.
That's fine. Yeah. So when I was listening to it, I couldn't just digest it as song by song. I was just listening to everything. I felt like I was in a theater watching an enactment of some very poignant event, and after a while I feel like I'm watching a movie, or I just feel like because I'm Nigerian, I'm back in Nigeria just witnessing an event happening. So it gives me this feeling that is rare in today's music, be it in today's music production, be it jazz, be it any kind of thing. So I think what I should just do is let you talk about the project.
I mean, what you exactly as you said, this project has been in the making for the past, I would say, 15 years. And what I mean for the past 15 years, because it's been a process of research material and composition, compositional work. I'm presenting some of these pieces separately, sometimes in different places. Like the first piece that I presented was a jazz and in concentrate. It was almost like a commission that I got from them, especially from the producer of this album, Jason Olaine, and then where I presented Troubled Waters, for instance. And that was the first time I presented a section of what the impact of CINQUE, the story of CINQUE, was into me. But then when I was researching more and realized, well, Troubled Waters speaks only about the revolt that happens over the cheap La Amistad. And then I'm like, but what about when CINQUE was free? And then what about when CINQUE was captured? And then that's how I created the first movement of the suite. Started with CINQUE, kind of portraying him as a free man in Africa, has this beautiful bluesy kind of thing, like a free spirit in a way, if you will. And then the second part of the first movement is called The Capture. It's like my attempt to kind of almost like portray him running and trying to fighting for his freedom and finally being captured. Then if you notice in between the second part and of the first movement and the third part, there is a chant. This particular chant is actually from...
What is it called?
It's called Canto de Despedida a los Esclavos. That particular chant is really, to me, was one of my most amazing breakthrough, because I recorded that chant in Cuba many years ago. And for some reason I knew that was very relevant, because actually this tradition of ganga is one of the traditions that's been nearly extinct in Cuba. The same thing like my tradition of Congolese music in my hometown, tambor yuca. The both traditions were near extinct, and I was doing this research in Cuba many years ago about forms of music that people don't really hear so much. I wanted, I wasn't really so much interested in Yoruba music, because Yoruba is like almost like the pop music of Cuba. Everybody knows about Yoruba. Also, even the instruments of Yoruba, the batats and sambos, are used in many configurations, so people are familiar with that. But ganga or tambor yuca, people are not familiar with that, even in Cuba. And then I find out that one of the songs that I recorded during my research trip, that tradition came from the same region where CINQUE was born, Sierra Leone and Liberia. And then that particular song, when I recorded, they told me that was a song that they sang to the enslaved people once they were captured and then sent to a ship bound to America.
Yeah.
The people who remain on the land, they will sing this song to those enslaved people. And that was like, oh my God, what a perfect way to segue from the capture to troubled waters, because the capture is like, okay, one is captured.
Yeah.
And then you hear the water, and then this chant was basically suggesting, okay, he's been taken away overseas. And then the continuation of the revolt of that happens overseas over the ship Amistad. That's how I start configuring everything, and that's how it took this long to put it all together, because I want to have all the parts that move seemingly from section to section.
Yes. Oh, wow. And then it goes to the second movement.
Right.
Yeah. There's a chant I really like in the second movement. Sorry to use the word like. I don't know. I just feel like saying the word like is like cheapening, like devaluing your song. I should feel it more than like it,
You vibrate with it.
Yeah. I should relate to it, connect to it. So I really connect. It's called Maluagda.
Maluagda, yeah.
Maluagda, yeah.
Yeah, that song. That song is from my home, like from the Congolese area of my hometown, San Luis, and it's from this tradition called tambor juka. And once again, like nearly 15 years ago, I was born in that environment.
Yeah.
Since I was a kid. Okay. I remember my first memory of that. I remember like this fire on the middle of the street, and then these large drums, that have been around the fire. But as a kid, I was more thrown into the fire because we didn't get to see fire in the middle of the town. I was like, oh, this is so exciting, the fire, But then I realized later on when I went to music school that actually they were tuning the drums, and then I after I grew older, I decided to let me just go back and reach out to my community and to learn a little bit more about this tradition, because I didn't really know, even though I was born in that environment, but I didn't study it. And then I was like, I'm going to study these traditions. And then I went back and then started recording and documenting everything. And then that was one of the songs that really impacted me from that particular tradition. And I wanted to...
What language was that? I know I've asked you this before you explained, but can you explain the language?
These are all old words from the Congolese tradition.
Yeah.
In Congolese tradition in Cuba, you have tambor juka, which is my region. Then you have palo, which was the song that was sang in the capture. And then you have makuta, which is another strange form. And then there's also kimfuiti. There's many different strings within the Congolese tradition. This word maluada is a Congolese word, especially from the tambor juka tradition. And that's one of the songs that was kind of almost passed on to me.
Yeah.
And then I learned it, and then I decided to do something about it.
And can you talk about what we were talking about earlier before we started recording? You talked about how these songs are being songs and the languages are preserved in these songs, and these languages are not necessarily spoken anymore, but we know, or you really understand the meaning of these songs. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, in Cuba, the way the traditions goes is basically go from family to family. Even in my region, in Congolese tradition, those songs are transmitted from the older generation to the younger generation in a form almost of a daily basic ritual. It's not even that they have a school where they teach the vocabulary or they teach the word. It's just basically the grandfather taught that to the father, and then the father taught that to the son. It's just like that. And in many traditions, unless you are in like practicing the tradition, you learn about those by association. You learn about the singing, you learn because it's in everyday life. You hear the melodies and you kind of learn as well.
Yeah.
But the people who know really all the secrets, and a lot of these religions are very secretive. Like the Congolese tradition is very secretive. And if you are not practicing within the Congolese tradition, it's very secretive. You know, in the CD package, there's like a lot of signs and symbols.
Yeah.
Those symbols has a very profound meaning. And if you don't really know, you are not in the tradition, you don't know what that is. And I was in the packaging, I included the symbols and then also the meaning of them. Because actually, before I even put it in the CD, I had to make sure, because I don't practice the religion necessarily, so I want to make sure that what I was putting was good. So I consulted with my friend Alex Lasalle, who's has scholar, research as well, and is an amazing musician, and he also practiced. And then I checked with him. It's like, hey, listen, I wanted to put some signs. I asked permission for it because you didn't want to put something that was not really.
Yes. Yeah.
So in other words, a lot of things goes into it. One is to be in the religion, and the other one, the other thing is to know, like, it's like how you learn about those songs and how. And who are your teachers? Who tells you what are the songs are? Because also you want to make sure that whoever's teaching you the song, is highly respected, and then you want to be you want to respect them back. You don't want to be singing something that is not accurate or something.
Yeah. So you were talking about how a lot of work went into this. I can't remember how long you told me, but I know it's more than 10 years.
Yeah, like around 15 years.
Around 15 years. So you didn't just stand up and say, hey, I want to write a CD about CINQUE. Probably no.
No, I mean, if I think through, I've been in America almost like maybe a little bit over 20 years now. So ever since I came here, that I came here just because I wanted to learn more about jazz, and I was doing jazz in Cuba, but I felt like there was something missing. And really to speak the language of jazz, you had to be in the land where it's being created. So, and then ever since I've been here, I started noticing like the division between what we so-called Latin music and jazz when it shouldn't be. And then I started realizing, well, these two genres are we share so much things in common that I think there gotta be a thread there that unified those two. And then every single one of my projects is almost like going higher and higher to reach that to break that wall. Since my very first album was pretty much straightforward, like a Latin jazz, so-called Latin jazz album, those Incantation, and where it was more like, okay, I'm here, I seen through the eye of, I'm from Cuba, so trying to mix some jazz, let's do some Latin jazz, And even though I was trying to do something very interesting about it, like not the typical Latin jazz that I was experiencing when I came here, and that album actually did really well as well, because it was one of the best recordings of the year, and it was really very well received. Then I moved into something I called The Source in Between, which was something like writing pieces of song that they were the root of the composition were pretty much Cuban or Afro-Cuban, but then at the same time could be interpreted as a jazz tune. And then I did Odua Suite, which is actually a chant, an Afro-Cuban chant, but when you hear it, it sounds like almost like a Coltrane piece, like a prayer, like that the same pieces that Coltrane was writing in his latest year, like the Lo Supreme, and in the same kind of vein. And I did, and then I did the title of the track, The Source in Between. I did it first as a hard bop tune, and then appears the same at the end of the album, the same track, and I put a conga on it, and then basically to say, see, it doesn't even change. I didn't even touch. All I did was to put a rhythm on it, and it changed completely to a Latin jazz kind of and that was basically the point of it. Then I did the Caribbean Tinge album, which I did it live at This Is. I started researching about the music in New Orleans and how how tied that was to to Cuban music. And then I started like researching again about and realizing, not researching, but started to realize that New Orleans music and Afro-Cuban music, or we have this same root. And then I discovered Jelly Roll Morton, Spanish tinge, which was actually, it was his version of Habanera, the Cuban musical form known as Habanera. And then he called it Spanish tinge because he was introduced to this music by a Spanish composer who happens to be in Cuba, and then traveled to New Orleans and learned the Habanera style of music in Cuba, and then went to New Orleans, and then somehow Jelly Roll Morton heard that music through him. And then probably, perhaps, I'm speculating here, but perhaps that's the reason why he called it Spanish tinge, because it's like, something's from Spanish. But at the same time, there was not, at the time, Cuba was not defined as a country, was still a colony. So most of the people who were traveling in and out were Spanish people. And then maybe that's also had to do with the title. But the reason why I call it Caribbean tinge, because that figures that inspired Jelly Roll Morton to do his Spanish tinge were Caribbean roots, were Cuban roots. And then that's why the title of the album, Caribbean tinge, and the approach to the music.
Nice. And in this CD, one other element that you incorporated that brings it to life is the narration. I enjoyed those narrations. Who did the narration and how did that come about?
The narration was done by Terrence McKnight, and it's a fabulous speaker, and he's an amazing person. And I knew about him because I think at the Euron Green Foundation I did some event, and then I think he was there, and I loved his voice and the way his passion to music. And then when I was talking to my producer Jason Olaine, I always had the narration in mind, and then I thought like, maybe we can approach Harry Belafonte to do the narration. And then we tried to approach Harry, but it didn't work out for several specifics. And then the second person was like, well, let's ask Terrence. And then it just basically the narration is almost to, because I think this music has so much historical backgrounds that I think if people don't hear those historical backgrounds on where this whole thing begins and how it's formed, they're missing something. And then I wanted to give them a little bit of information about the historical background. So I think, and that's what gave him the sense of a movie, because it's kind of like connects everything that happens at the same time and gives some meaning, a more stronger meaning to the music than just having the music on its own.
You should have him also do it in Spanish.
We're gonna do it in Spanish in Mexico, because when I go to Mexico, that's one of the things that we're gonna do, which is very interesting, because it's gonna be for a Spanish Mexican audience, so we're gonna translate it into Spanish.
Oh, nice. Okay. And you have some really good musicians on the album. Do you want to talk about some of them or all of them?
The group of musicians that I have on the album, they're dear friends, dear friends. It's basically a community. They've been working with me for many years now. When I did the jazz syncopators, Steve Touré has done it, and Greg Tardy and Vincent Herring has done it. Todd Marcus, the guy who played bass clarinet, I played in his band many times, and even he's from Egypt, and then I even went to Egypt with him, with his band, and then that's how we got to know him. And it's like, okay, when I wanted to record, I wanted to invite you. Freddie Hendrix, also been working with him for quite some time now. And then I obviously, you notice I have Wynton Marsalis, which is one of my idols, and I feel so lucky to have him, because it's really hard to get the opportunity to play or to feature one of your idols, in general, and that was he did such an amazing contribution to it. And I'm really grateful for his support. Louis Nash I've been playing with him for years now. He's been in a lot of my projects, including the Caribbean Teens project. The same with Ricky Rodriguez. We've been performing for a long time in many different configurations. So we are also very good friends. Arturo Stable is my colleague from Cuba. He had played with me since my second recording. There's also In Between, and we play in many other different bands together. We did actually a piano duet album together. It's called Dos y Más. It's a very beautiful recording. And there's many other people like Alex Lasalle who sang who I met through the Pleneros de la 21, who I used to play with as well. The same with Jonathan Troncoso, I met through Pleneros de la 21 as well. He's also been playing with me for a long time. Then we also have this guy playing percussion. I forgot his name, but it will come back to me. Nelson Mateo. Nelson also played with the Pleneros de la 21 and also met through that particular environment. Then I invited a cellist, forgotten his name, Alex Waterman. He also I played with in his project, and he's also beautiful musicians and visionary and cellist. And then I went to New Orleans to record Leila Macala, who was on the premiere presentation of CINQUE, the first run of CINQUE at Jazz and Lincoln Center. And then I got introduced to Don Vapi, which was an amazing, an icon banjo player in New Orleans. And the reason why I went there, because I wanted really be in the environment where the music is. I wanted to have everything done for real. And even in the CD I used the drums that are actual drums from the particular regions that I'm talking about, because I didn't, normally in a Latin jazz recording, you use congas and that's it, or you use conga and you use batas, and then those are the two instruments that most people use. But I use the balsier, which is a very interesting drum from Santo Domingo. I use batas, I use congas, obviously I use atabales or palos or atabales, is a Congolese kind of particular drum, similar to the tambor yuca kind of drums, like a tall, very tall, skinny drums. Anyway, I use the wataka, which is like an instrument that I have. Is like a metal thing that we use in Congolese music. So I try to bring everything as real as possible.
Nice. And it comes across. And it sounds very authentic. Let's take a quick break. You are listening to Doing Jazz with Lawrence Chuno. The guest on this episode is pianist, composer, and educator Elio Villafranca. His new album, CINQUE, is available for purchase, download, and streaming. Elio, you've probably mentioned this a few times, and I know, but for sake of completion, I want to ask this question. Formally, where are you from?
I am originally from Cuba. I was born in a small town called San Luis, in the region of Pinar del Rio. San Luis is a small town. It's known for tobacco. All of the Cohiba cigars that people talked a lot about, that come from my region in San Luis. Nice. And one of the thing that I love the most is like when I go back home, the smell of the tobacco land is so intoxicating. It's really beautiful. That's the one thing I always do. Whenever I'm getting home, I open the window and see the tobacco fields and the smell and the color of the land, and it's just this kind of red tone kind of color in contrast with the green of the leaves of the tobacco. It's a really beautiful thing. That's where I was born, and that's where that's where this whole thing started. From that region, because very Congolese oriented region.
So did you go to school for music?
I did. Cuba? I went, but when I started as a painter.
Okay.
And then I did like a year of painting. In my house, I was born next to something we call Casa de Cultura, which is like a cultural center where you can receive free education on art. And then after being a painter for a little bit, then I pick up the guitar.
Okay.
And I wanted to
What age was this?
I did painting like about when I was 6 years old, 7 years old. Then the guitar I picked up when I was 8 or 9, somewhere in there. And then I stick there for a little bit, almost like 2 years. And I wanted to go to music school as a guitarist, but when the audition came to go to music school, there was no more room for guitarists. Guitar. So there was only a few choices. Among them was percussion. And I had a cousin who played drums. Because actually when I was in the guitar, we formed a group. Yeah. Like we were youngsters, but we formed a group and we even go to competitions. And then since I saw my cousin playing drums, like, well, maybe I just do drums too, because I like it. And perhaps then I switched to guitar in the school. I did that. I started as a percussionist. The switch to guitar never happened. Then I started liking percussion, but then I discovered the piano. And then that's how my whole pianistic career started. And I didn't take piano really seriously until I got to Havana. You have to understand, in Cuba, the music was this? Yeah, the music education in Cuba is very intensive, because it's 3 years I spent in Pinar del Rio, in the elementary school, concentrating on music and other things, but concentrating on music. Then 4 years in Havana in the middle school. That was when I was about 17. And then from 17 to from 15, 17, from 17 to 18 or 19. And then I went to higher education. That's also in Havana. At that time I was already full-on pianist. I was still doing composition and I was doing percussion. But then when I went to higher education, I did continue with the percussion. I started to do composition and then also continue with the piano. And this all was in classical music. My training was full on classical music. A lot of my teachers were Russians, because at that time Cuba was influenced by Russian, and then we have this treaty, this agreement with Russia that they provide many different things and on exchange for, I don't know, their presence and in Cuba. So they kind of like a Cold War kind of move type thing. But I benefited from a really great musical education. I mean, in classical music, and
then you moved here.
And then I moved here. Okay. I moved here because I moved here because I wanted. At the time I was with this really popular band in Cuba. It's called Carlos Varela. Okay. And I was with them for 8 years. I was their pianist and arrangers and all of that. And we traveled a lot. We did, a few different really major concerts, festival, including in Colombia. We played with Kool and the Gang and Pink Floyd and.
Wow.
And it was on that vein, was really successful. But I was really also graduating as a composer, and I wasn't having the opportunity to play my music. And in Cuba, I was just employed by him to be his arranger and his musician. So I felt like, okay, if I ever want to play my music, I need to get out of these situations otherwise. And then the opportunity came to come to America because I was teaching some American musicians in Cuba through the school. And then they invited me to go to Philadelphia to teach, and then I accepted. Okay. And then I came to America to teach, and then and I knew that I wanted to learn more about jazz, and that's how.
Oh, okay. Where did you teach in Philly?
I teach at the school called AMLA, Asociación de Músicos Latinos Americanos. Nice. And then I was just teaching piano and all the curriculums. I even wrote like a little book, piano book for them to teach the kids. And
Oh, nice. You mentioned that you teach at Juilliard.
Okay. At this moment, I teach. At this moment, I teach in many places. I teach at Juilliard. Okay. I teach at Manhattan School of Music. Okay. And I also teach at Temple University. In Philadelphia. Yeah. And just this for the summer, I'm also teaching a course at NYU. So nice. I'm all over the place.
You're all over the place. Wow. Yeah. When you teach, what title are you there? Like adjunct professor?
I'm adjunct. Okay. Yeah, I am adjunct professor. Yeah. Okay. Because I'm not a full-on faculty. Yeah. I don't know if I could be a full-on faculty just because of my schedule. Because on top of that, I perform a lot, and I am really blessed with the opportunity to be able to teach, which is actually one of my passions, about, because I really believe that I feel like I need to share my knowledge to people. And then and also be able to perform and travel and yeah.
What courses do you teach? Like at NYU, what was the name of the course?
At NYU is an interesting course. And NYU, what I'm teaching this course is called Culture, Leadership, and Innovation.
Okay.
And it's through the leadership department at NYU. And this course just speak about leadership in an artistic way. Okay. The students who take the course, they're like from different aspects of artistic life. There some are theater, and some other are in leadership programs and not necessarily musicians per se, like in terms of the professional career and everything like that. So we talked a lot about leadership. We talk about leadership, and my role is like not only to talk about what is the conceived concept of leadership, even from the 1900s, like the zeitgeist theory and the great main theory and all those things. And then, but I give her a spin of an artistic spin, what it means to be a leader for an artist, and how things that we use as an artistic element in our music translate to everyday life.
I am now confused because that's like an academic course.
Yeah, it is an academic course.
Okay, what was your degree in? Your degree, you have a degree from Cuba, right?
Yeah, but my degree from Cuba was more about classical music and percussion.
It's like a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
Did you get a master's degree?
Well, it's an equivalent to a master's degree because the thing is like the amount of years that you spend. Yeah. It's just that Cuba didn't figure out how to really, because it's a completely different system. It doesn't really. It doesn't really relate to, now they're trying to kind of like make it even to America, because there was a lot of problems like when somebody come with a degree from Cuba, they'll be like, what is this? Because they don't understand it. I mean, I spent like, for instance, in American system, for you to get is 3 years of bachelor's, and then you do like, you spend
maybe 6 years for bachelor's and masters.
But I spent 3, 4, and 5.
Whoa.
I spent like nearly like 4. I mean, I've spent nearly 14 years because I do double masters or double career, the composition and percussion. So you spend, and then you can't really measure that.
Yeah.
Like I remember when I wanted to do a doctorate degree in Temple University as a composer. Yeah. And then when I showed them my work, they were like, "Oh my God, you've done more work than any other." But they don't know how to translate it. It's because it's how it is in this country. They like things in very particular way and things like that. So it's more like equivalent to a master.
Okay, sorry, I'm jumping around, but follow me, please. Juilliard is a conservatory.
Yeah.
Right. In NYU, you taught like an academic course. Juilliard, is it the same kind of course? Or?
In Juilliard, it's more like I'm in the jazz department.
Okay.
And I coach ensembles, and sometimes I do like a private piano lessons.
Oh, okay.
I don't do like regular courses on classes. They do have also other people who teaches regular courses, in classes. But it's different. And NYU, the same thing at NYU. Okay. And NYU actually I teach a course. It's called Roots. Rhythms and music of the Americas. In that course, what I do is like tie everything together, because a lot of times in musical education in this country, they teach you very selective group of music, but they don't teach you the overall view of American culture.
Yeah.
And my point on these classes is to kind of like to say, listen, we are not alone. Like this, what you see here is also present over here. And because we are not, America didn't develop as a vacuum, like all of a sudden, like separate from everything else. America is just one big thing where we share so many different things. And then now in the classes they start realizing, they start recognizing this rhythm is similar to this, because they all, everywhere, let me put it this way, everywhere where Africa went, where a population of African people touched the land, affected completely the whole thing and influenced everything what's happening in whatever place from forever.
Yeah.
And that's when you start seeing how similar or related things are, culturally speaking. Yeah.
Wow. Now, from having just spoken with you for for maybe close to an hour now, I'm beginning to see where this CD comes from. It's like it's not just one experience. It's not just, hey, I'm a musician and this is what I have as a musician. It comes from a lot of experiences, like rich experiences, a lot of reading, a lot of studying, a lot of breaking boundaries, trying to branch into different things and bringing them together in the art form of music. So a question I would like to ask is, what does success mean to you?
Wow, that's an interesting question, because I never really think so much about it. I mean,
because all our endeavors in life, we want to succeed.
Well, I mean, that's a very interesting question, because I sometimes struggle with that, because when people ask me sometimes similar questions, I realize that I never really put thought into this kind of thing. So then it always got me by surprise, like, oh, what does that mean? For me, I guess the non-capitalistic way of thinking coming from Cuba, I mean, success will be like get the opportunity to share what I'm sharing with people and see that people understanding something about where I'm coming from, and to present something that it has a meaningful thing. Like for this album, for instance, and even for all my albums, I always wanted always to hear, like, if I hear this album 15 years like later, I still feel like, oh wow, this was really good. I always like to feel that way. I feel this way right now with my first CD, Incantations. The way when I hear back, and I remember being in Bolivia one time. I was driving to a dinner invitation that somebody gave me, and then the guy who was driving me had some music on. I was remember being in the front seat, and immediately it was like, what is that? Sounds so good. And they was like, that was you. That's your Incantation CD. I was like, because I normally don't tend to listen to my music. I record it, put it out there.
You forget it.
And then that's it. And then move on to the next thing and the next thing. And then Incantation, I recorded in 2003. And I haven't heard back Incantation since, since forever. And then that, it feels like, wow, I like that feeling of doing something that I still will enjoy even from many years back. That's in the sense of Cuban. I mean, in success, in terms of capitalistic mindset, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess people like the recognition, I don't know. But, recognition in this country is sometimes so political, and so that it really... I really don't think much about it for that particular reason, because it's just, you never know. It's not about whether you have really put a lot of effort and energy into a good work. It depends who's receiving it. And also depends on how well that person understands what you're talking about. That's the thing. Because the only reason why this music will impact somebody is like if that somebody, that person, has an interest in the subject and also understand something for the music to impact you, to feel like, oh wow, this is something. Otherwise, might not. And everything is relative. So for that reason, I don't really put a lot of energy, right? I put a lot of energy on sharing what I know. Like talking to you and talking to other interview that I have, and just putting it out there. The same way I put the albums, I said, well, I didn't want to just give you the music. I just could have done the same thing in one CD and just give you just the music, and it would be the suite, the same thing, it would be CINQUE, it would be the same title. But then people will not know where everything's come from. And I get to a place where sometimes I get tired of, when you hear artists saying like, oh, this recording come from this inspired by this and that, and then but you don't know if I don't you don't know what he's talking about. Whatever you say, you're saying, you know.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I mean, it's just think about it, like true. You know, and honestly, to be honest, and not to sound like, you know, snobby or criticizing any of my in the communities of my musician community, but in terms of composition, there is a lot of bias, and I know because I know and I see it all the time. Like sometimes people compose something, and then you know, just nice chord, nice melody, and then it's like, oh, let me see, let's call it this. Because it's catchy, whatever, you know, and then they talk about it life like it was like something like, oh yeah, when I thought about this, I was thinking about the sea and whatever, you know, and but at the same time, if you as an audience, you don't really know, then basically you've been lied to in many different ways. Yeah. So the reason why I did what I do is here's like, okay, this is the background, this is where the chants come from, this is what I did with it, this is the story, this is like I'm trying to give everybody access to my creative thinking to see where everything is, and so basically to share culture in a meaningful way. That's what I'm trying to say. I want to share culture in a meaningful way. I want to share culture in the same way I experienced it in Cuba, or similar to the way I experienced it in Cuba. That's why when I do a concert, I always integrate dance.
Nice.
Because I think melody, rhythms, and dance, they all go together, and chanting and everything, they all go together. You don't experience culture by just one element and not the other.
Nice. Now, before we started recording, we had a lot of conversation, and one of the things we talked about was how to bring jazz to the mainstream. Like we talked about the struggles in educating people on how important jazz is and how it kind of forms the foundation of most of the music we hear today in America. And do you have anything to say about that?
I mean, I have. How to bring jazz to the mainstream? Well, the only way to bring jazz to the mainstream is just by educating people, by doing what you're doing, or by doing what I'm doing, by doing what many other people are doing. Just basically inform people and share with people real, you know, music and talked about the value of those things. And also, you know, and also from our part of as an artist, we had to be responsible for that in a way that we had to also put out there something that is meaningful to people as well. Because if we, in a way, kind of like lose that meaning, or to put something meaningful out there, then it's really, it creates like less impact. Like you thinking about Big Small and you know and Tupac and you know those are like real artists in a way, like they were talking about their lives, you know, and that's the reason create such an impact in society, because it's not like let's do this because it's you know how people duplicate everything nowadays, even in pop, like you hear something and then like for example Childish Gambino, like you know the things that he's doing, or the things like that, really good art that inspire people in you know in their lives, you know. And the reason why it impacts people is because they mean it, and they're you know it's real to them. It's they're talking about their own personal experience in a real way, not in a economical sellout kind of like making money way. It's just they're talking about and it happens that they're successful, and that's great. That's when it's perfect, when you get to talk or express art the way you really want to express out, and then become successful. That is a dream come true, without having to bend just to cave to the multi corporations, like, oh yeah, you should do this so that way you know. And I think that's important.
Nice. And another thing I was also thinking is that sometimes the reason, one of the things that contributes to jazz struggling is because, first of all, it requires a lot of education to become a jazz artist, you know. And then when you become a jazz artist, sometimes we forget the entertainment part of music. We forget that in addition to being musicians and being players and working as a practitioner, we should also entertain the people. That's
I mean that's
and we should bring them in to the entertainment. We shouldn't just go and play like academic music to them. It doesn't matter if it's a 7/8 beat or if it's nobody's thinking about the flattened ninth chord flattened fifth chord that you're playing that is so cool, They want to participate in the music, and sometimes I feel like jazz musicians forget about that because they get really inundated in the academic aspect of it.
You're 100%. You're 100% right. But there, this is one of the things that we creative beings struggle with. Mm-hmm. And for me, okay, before I came here to America, not to your house. Before I came to America, thing was very simple to me. Mm-hmm. Just do good art,
yes,
and people will appreciate it. Right? That was the typical my line of thought. As a matter of fact, I learned a hard lesson when I went to Spain. I was in Spain on a trip, and this is just like a life learning experience. Mm-hmm. I was in a recording studio recording with this group used to call Taller Canario. I was in the Canary Islands. And we were in the studio recording and doing that. And then the engineer turned out to me like, okay, let me ask you a question. I said, yes, like if you have $5, you have $5 to create a project and distribute a project, how you divide the money? I say, easy. I spent $4 on making a really killing product, and then I just, and then do $1 for promotion and things like that. And it was like, wrong. You spend $1 to create the product and $4 for promotion. That's the difference between, and that is something like it was like an eye awakening for me, because I'm thinking like, how so? Because in my system, in socialist system, in communist system, they really bank on creating a really good product and assuming that since everybody, they kind of thinking in terms of education, like everybody's educated, everybody, has, since everything is like pretty much directed to things like that, you think like if somebody's educated, they can then hear the value of the work. Yeah, but we are in a completely different society. Promotion is everything that you spend. You can create the worst product, but you promote it well. That product could be the most selling product.
Yes,
it is. And not to get political, but who we having as a president, it's a perfect example of that. Like
and he keeps promoting.
Exactly, it's the worst thing. It's the worst thing, and yet people are buying it because he's just constantly talking about it. So back to your question.
Yeah,
entertainment versus good art. I think the both need to be hand to hand. I think the one thing I always believe, and the one thing I always tell people, it doesn't really matter so much about when I'm on a show, when I'm doing a concert, I really don't think so much about entertaining people. What I'm thinking is I want to bring something real to them.
Yeah.
Something that they will value and they'll appreciate. That's my number one. I communicate with them. My entertainment was pretty much about communicating with them.
Yes, that's the same thing.
But it's not that I will compromise my music for the entertainment.
Yeah. It's like you're bringing them in,
Yeah, right. If that's it, yes. But sometimes people confuses the word entertainment, and then that start factoring in their music.
I see.
They try making the music a little cheaper to entertain.
I know.
Just because they know like audience might like this,
yes,
and then I'm gonna do this, so the audience like it. For me, it's always like I want to bring something real to them, because I think the one thing that everybody vibrates in my experience is to realness. You can kind of like get like a cheap clap and laugh and things like that, but I think when you bring something real to them, they resonate with you.
Yes,
and they vibrate with you in a complete different higher level. And even the people who might not like the music, the worst thing they will tell you is like, it's not my kind of thing, but I can see the value of this.
They see your honesty. They see your
that's to me is like because art. There was art for entertainment. Like back in the day, there's art that was like just to entertain and there was art for artists that they were not necessarily for entertainment, which was like a personal statement, because art is for the most part is a very personal statement. It's your way of speaking. It's your life. It's your voice. You know, and if you want to speak your voice, you have to speak your voice through your voice. You can't be speaking your voice through oh, what do you want me to say? You want to say this? I'll say this. You know, I don't know if that really, there is a place for that.
Yes.
Absolutely. There's entertainment, you know, industry where you can kind of like please the audience and please everybody else. But in terms of artistic relevance, you know, you should do you.
Yes.
You know, like you should basically be honored your own sense of artistry, your own voice, your own, you know, like be real.
Yes.
As an artist.
And
then if it happens that you're not liked, well, I'm sorry. I mean, not everything. I don't expect everybody to like me. I know that.
Yeah, of course.
But I do expect like whoever listens to what I'm doing, it feels like, oh wow, this is valuable, or this is real, or this is, you know.
You really took what I meant to say and you explained it in a better way. Yeah. When I said entertainment, I meant inviting people, making effort to invite people into your honest art that you're doing. You're not just doing something because you think it's cool or because you think it's difficult.
Right.
You know, like you play, let's say, giant steps. You can play it as fast as faster than everybody. You think that is cool. No, people might not understand, but there are ways to do it in such a way that you invite the people into what you're playing.
Yeah, as long as your process is honest. I mean, as you know, art is so open, and I don't mind. Really, I don't mind. Like for example, you're thinking about Ornette Coleman. You know, that was an artistic statement. That wasn't like he was thinking like, I'm gonna do my music this way to impress people or do anything. No, that he did the music this way because that was the time in the 70s when he was living. It was like he wanted to make his artistic statement, his freedom from all other forms of music that it felt like didn't resonate with him. I'm resonating with something else. The same thing like with Bartok or you know, any other artist or even painters. Or Dali, or you know, with his weird paintings, and you know, like it speak to his own mind. And then happens like, wow, people realize, oh, Monk for that matter. You know, Monk was disliked by a lot of people at the beginning because the way he was approaching music, and he wasn't approaching it that way just because it was like, I want to be. No, because that's the way he hears the music.
Nice.
You know, if he wanted it to be. If he didn't want it to go through such a struggle, he would have probably played something else. Play like, I don't know. I mean, he idealized Duke Ellington's and the great masters of you know, jazz artistry, but he wanted to find his own voice. And he happens to be one of the biggest geniuses that we had in jazz, you know, and still is. And the reason why it's so important, because it was original, it was genuine, was unique, was, you know, he embodied his music. You hear him, you see him, and you hear him. It's the same thing. It's the same person. It's not like, it's nothing fake about it.
Nice. Wow, nice. I can talk to you forever. Let's conclude with a little fun game section that I call turn up, mute. I'm going to give you two options.
Okay.
Right? You're going to turn one up and we're going to mute the other. All right. And whatever you turn up, it just how you feel at the particular moment. It doesn't mean that you don't like the other one. It just means that, okay, this is how I feel now. Maybe when I leave here, when I go back to Riverdale, I'm going to like the other one. Okay.
Okay.
So let's start with, these are hard questions.
So wait. Okay. But then whenever I hear the question, I should say to you,
you just
mute or
what I'll give you. Okay, I'm gonna give you two options: option A and option B. You just tell me turn up option A, mute option B.
Got it.
Or
okay.
Turn up option B. Okay. Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea.
Okay, turn up Asian. Turn up Herbie Hancock.
Okay.
I'm gonna mute Herbie Hancock. Turn up Chick Corea.
Chick Corea. Okay. For now, yeah.
For now,
when you leave, okay, cool. Do you have any particular reason?
Chick is he's a really dear friend to me, and he's one of my mentors.
Nice.
And he is to me one of the most creative being and real, artists. Like, he's really, I don't know what to say. It's like, I love Herbie. I love her. Both of them, they were one of the people that I listened the most when I was in Cuba. But it happens when I came here, I get the opportunity to meet Chick and then also play with him. Several environments, and I get to know him at a personal level, and it's just really a matchup. He lived to my expectation of what a generous and great artist and friend is.
Okay, nice. Havana, New York.
Wow. Oof, that's a hard one. I would say mute Havana, tune up New York.
Okay.
As a hard one. And the reason why I'm saying this is because...
Good choice. I say good choice.
Well, the reason why I'm saying this is actually, my people might say like, what? That's where you're coming from and all these things. But the thing is, the reason why New York is because New York gave me a freedom, an artistic freedom that Havana wasn't really giving me. And in New York, I regained my voice, and I could speak about the things that matters to me. And then in New York, I could talk about Havana. But in Havana, I couldn't talk about New York.
Nice. Incantation, the source. Incantation is one choice. The source in between, the other choice. These are your two albums.
Yeah.
Two of your albums.
All right. I would say, like I think I mentioned to you before, I would say Tune Up, Incantation, Mute, the source in between. Why? Incantation was my baby. It was my first album. And normally people say, like, normally in your first recording, is you put so much love into it because it's your first project. And also was my Elegua. Elegua in Yoruban religion is the deity who opens the door, who opens the ways, and also the one who closes the door. But I'm not in that that moment yet. But it did open. Incantation did open the doors for me into this world, this beautiful world of jazz.
Nice. Elio Villafranca, thank you for coming on Doing Jazz.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Lauren, for having me.
You're welcome. I
it's
hope
been
we
a
can
pleasure.
do this again.
Absolutely. Yeah. Been a truly pleasure.
Nice.
Thank you.
Later.
1807, the United States Congress joined with Great Britain in abolishing the African slave trade. Despite the international ban, Cuba continued transporting captive Africans to its sugar plantations until the 1860s.